Uhuru. Good morning, and I want to thank everybody for being here, for the community members and the media here at this very important press conference on today. My name is Yeshitela Anai. I am the director for Burning Spear Media for the Uhuru Movement and the African People's Socialist Party, and I will be your MC for this morning. So today's press conference is the first official public appearance of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Penny Hess, and Jesse Nevel, who were recently indicted on April 18th, 2023 by the US government on bogus charges. We are joined via Zoom by the legal counsel for these comrades, Addie Griffin, who will be representing Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Mutaki Akbar, who will be representing Jesse Nevel, and Leonard Goodman, who will be representing Penny Hess. And so the order of our program will be the lawyers first, Addie Griffin, Mutaki Akbar, following with Leonard Griffin, and then we'll move into the speakers, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Penny Hess, and Jesse Nevel. There will be time for questions and answers from the media, and both the legal counsel and Chairman Penny and Jesse will be able to speak to those questions. So without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Addie Griffin, the legal counsel for Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Addie Griffin, and along with Tom Inskeep, my co-counsel, we have the pleasure of representing Omali Yeshitela in this matter. At this point, we are waiting for the discovery to be sent from the US government. We will then review the documents and the evidence against our clients, and we will defend our clients accordingly. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mutaki Akbar. I'm an attorney here in Tallahassee, Florida. I have the privilege of representing Mr. Jesse Nevel in the case. Everything is just starting, it's just initiating. We'll get the discovery pretty soon. And as Addie Griffin stated, once we get the discovery, we'll know which direction this case is going to go into. This is a very interesting case. It's one of those that's not seen very often. If you're familiar with the Uhuru Movement, the African People's Socialist Party, then you know the work that they've done in the community and that they will continue to do in the community. And we want to make sure that this indictment, this this prosecution doesn't get in the way of the important work that this organization does and will continue to do.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Leonard Goodman. I'm a Chicago attorney, and I have the privilege to represent Penny Hess in this case. And I look forward to fighting these charges in court. As the other attorneys told you, this case is getting started. We haven't received the government's evidence yet. I do believe, it's important to note that there's some very troubling aspects to this case where it appears to be a rare case where the federal government is using federal criminal laws to stifle dissenting voices. And it's something certainly we need to all pay close attention to. And I know we all appreciate the support that you all have given the defendants and that they will need throughout this ordeal. Thank you.
Uhuru. My name is Omali Yeshitela. I'm chairman of the African People's Socialist Party. First, I'd like to express my appreciation to Comrade Yeshitela Anai for hosting this press conference, to you who have come out, and to the incredible attorneys who are representing us in this case. I'd like to begin by just giving a bit of background on some things that have transpired. Most of you are aware that on July 29th, my home and offices of our movement in 2 states came under attack by the FBI, who came in armored vehicles, who used flashbang grenades and drones, who terrorized the communities that we live in, taped them off with the cooperation of local police organizations, who threatened the life of my wife and myself with laser targeting devices mounted on assault weapons and pre-dawn raids Most of you know something about that. This was when we came to learn that some indictment was pending against a Russian national and that our names were mentioned in the indictment. This is when we heard that there existed a search warrant that they utilized to steal properties from our homes, from our offices, that they use as the basis of utilizing battering rams to break down doors, that they use as the basis for, after leaving my home in North St. Louis, the most economically depressed sector of St. Louis, mostly African people live there, and then going to South St. Louis, which is where the majority of the white people live in St. Louis, and attacking our office there that was headquarters for the African People Solidarity Committee, where Comrade Jesse Nevel lived in an apartment upstairs, and after battering the doors down, they went upstairs and they threatened at gunpoint, handcuffed Jesse Nevel and his current wife, Amanda Carlozzi. And then at the same time, this coordinated attack went to the home of Penny Hess and her housemate, Comrade Kitty Riley. And they used the same tactics, they handcuffed people, et cetera. They occupied our properties for hours on end. So most of you know something about that. We were characterized as unindicted co-conspirators in a case revolving, they said, around a Russian national who was not in the country. But we were alerted by FBI agents that this was going to be big news, which is why you're here now. Apparently, that was part of what this was about. So I wanted to just bring us up to date on that. On May 2nd, I went to a hearing in Tampa, Florida, federal court, after having learned that the indictment had come. After 9 months, we were actually indicted. I was handcuffed, put in leg irons. I had mugshot taken of me. Something similar happened to Comrade Penny Hess on that day. It would occur later for Jesse Nevel. I was taken before a judge, and we made not guilty pleas to the absurd charges that we had to deal with, and released on what is characterized as the least restrictive bail that they have for someone who has not been convicted of a crime, and which required me to turn over my passport, both existing passport and expired passport, required me to guarantee that there were no weapons in the house that I live in, that I have to notify the court or this entity associated with the court every time I wanted to make a move. Anytime I was going someplace, I had to get permission to do that. So I wanted to just give some background on that, and hope I have not overspoken. I know there are lawyers behind me who, and I don't have access to an earphone for them to say, shut up, or anything like that, but, and which is really important, because as many people are learning, there's no such thing as privacy anymore in this country, that we're being listened to, watched every place. And so one has to be careful of what one says. I wanted to also indicate that there's been, I think, a bit of misunderstanding about my connection to Russia. Now I know because my first and most significant contact I had with Russians was when I was in Berlin, Germany. As a
Mr.
soldier.
Chairman, I would ask not to get into the specifics about any contacts with Russia at this point. Thank you.
I'm not talking specifically about, I'm talking about contact with the US Army. I'm talking about being in the United States Army. I'm talking about being in Berlin when the Berlin Wall was created. I'm talking about being in one of the first US military tanks that was in a military combat related situation with Russians. I was in one of those tanks. I was there in early 1961 when that Berlin Wall was created. So that's something that's not been mentioned at all. And I hear you, Attorney Griffin, but I just thought that that should help to give some clarity. And that's the relationship that I think is worth mentioning. I also want to say that my crime is my absolute belief in free speech. I have been arrested in this city. This building that you're sitting in now is one that was attacked by more than 300 law enforcement officials after the 1996 assassination by United States by police organization of Tyrone Lewis. And there was a concern that we were having a meeting here, and there was an indictment. The grand jury was meeting to deal with an indictment of possibilities of the cops who had killed Tyrone Lewis. And we had a meeting scheduled at that same time here in this building. And this building, after the police arrived and first pepper sprayed me in the face outside the building, had a grand show of force with several police cars with their weapons out of the doors here, right here in this building, in this city. This is before the city was declared to be paradise by people who don't live in the Black community. So this building, because the police had drawn a huge crowd outside, and because we were going to speak about the fact that the state refused to indict James Knight and Sandra Minor for killing 18-year-old Tyrone Lewis down the street there. And the police attacked this building. The police first sent a message to me, who was inside the building, that we had 5 minutes to get out of the building, or because they had declared our being here an illegal assembly. And if we were not out, they were going to use tear gas in the building. And within seconds of that announcement, tear gas began to fill this building. Police were shooting in tear gas. The configuration of the doors were a bit different at that time. It's been reconfigured since that time. So tear gas came into this because of what I was going to say, because of what they thought I was going to say, because of the issue of speaking out. I was arrested in this city, they say, for verbal abuse of a policeman. They handcuffed me for that and jailed me for that. In every instance, it's been free speech question. I was arrested in Gainesville, Florida, some 4 days after the assassination of Martin Luther King, some 8 days after being released from prison on bail for tearing down the mural that there seems to be a consensus today was a racist mural that they nevertheless gave me 5 years in prison for having torn down. I was in Gainesville, Florida, and at that time I made a speech. And part of that speech said that the bullet that killed Martin Luther King had to kill nonviolence. I was arrested for that. They said because it was inciting to riot. And despite the fact that no riot occurred, but I thought about a riot, they said. I only had to want a riot to occur for that to be something that jailed me. I was out on bond something like a month after that arrest. And after getting out on bond, I was out for 6 hours. And then the sanitation workers in St. Petersburg, Florida went on strike. And the Attorney General for the state of Florida met with my bondsman, and they came off my bond so that I could not come back to St. Petersburg, Florida, where the sanitation workers were on strike because of what I might say. In every instance, it's been a question of free speech that I've been attacked for, that I've been assaulted for. And so the thing is that with the exception of the removal of the mural, every arrest that I've had up to now has been around free speech issues. And this is no different. I was handcuffed in the backseat of a police car and beaten with clubs and got to a court and the cop was exonerated for the fact that despite the fact I was handcuffed, he said that when taking me to the police, to jail, I leaned out of the window and was saying something to somebody outside the window. And so for my own protection, they beat me. They clubbed me almost unrecognizably. And then I went to jail for that. I have been shot at by assassins for what I do. I have been shot at. My house has been firebombed. And in Oakland, California, shot at in San Francisco, California. And so my basic point is that every confrontation that I've had with the state in my life, with the exception of the mural, has been around free speech. And this is no different. It's a free speech question. I believe in free speech. And I learned about free speech in the United States. I was a relatively good student as a young person. They taught free speech. They taught that these are the basic principles enshrined in this country. And I believe in free speech. If I didn't believe in free speech, I would never have said anything because they kill Black people for talking in this country. They kill Black people for whistling in this country. They kill Emmett Till for the accusation that he whistled at somebody. Free speech, free speech, free speech. And free speech has to be afforded to Black people. If it's not afforded to us, then there can be no free speech for anybody. And this is something that everybody should understand, because the assault on free speech, the assault on basic democratic principles, is one that's always made against someone or some group that is assumed to be unpopular. This is the way they open the door to an assault on the right of anybody to speak, because there's an assumption that this is unpopular speech. Yes, I believe that African people should be free. Yes, I believe that Africa should be free. Yes, I believe that this country was founded on the genocide of the indigenous people and the free stolen labor of Black people. Yes, and I'm going to say that, but I should have a right to say it. I was taught that when I went to school, and I believed it when I went to school. And if I am guilty of anything, it is in believing in the principles that was taught to me all my life when I was in school. If I'm guilty of anything, that's what I'm guilty of. And so, Counselor, I hope I'm still in your good stead, but I was just exercising free speech. Thank you.
Uhuru. Thank you, Director Keeley. I want to salute our brilliant lawyers and attorneys and co-counsel for this attack that the Uhuru movement is facing. My name is Penny Hess. I am the chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee. That is an organization of white people that works under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. Our job is to go into the white community and organize for reparations to African people I am one of the Uhuru Three who has been indicted with the bogus charges by the US government that are targeting Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party. And as the chairman stated, my home was also raided by the FBI at 5 in the morning as part of an attack on the Uhuru movement on July 29, 2022, as well as the building that we work out of in the Solidarity Committee, which is owned by the African People's Socialist Party, but which is located in South St. Louis on a busy street, Gravois Avenue, in the heart of the white community there, and which has a banner flying on it that says unity through reparations, which has the basis for a tremendous amount of organizing against what in St. Louis is called the Delmar divide, the brutal divide between the African community and the white population there, as we see here as well. And the African People's Solidarity Committee is the organization of white people. It was formed by Chairman Omali Yeshitela in 1976, right here in St. Petersburg. And I am still part of the African People's Solidarity Committee after 47 years, because African people in this country and in Africa and every place that African people are still have no power, still suffer under colonial domination, still are impoverished, and have and live in conditions of deep oppression. And there's still police murders, massive poverty, mass imprisonment, gentrification, unemployment, loss of African babies and mothers, and a foster care system that takes African children out of their community. That is considered genocide by the United Nations. And I am here today because I have a deep and profound respect, admiration, and unity with my leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, the African People's Socialist Party, and the Uhuru movement. And for nearly 50 years, I have been involved in the Uhuru movement and seen the chairman do nothing more than fight relentlessly and tirelessly, speaking out in the name and in the interest of the poor and the oppressed, not just explaining the world, but changing it, taking it on his shoulders to change the world. And in a country where the daily news cycle is reporting endless US wars, mass murders, poverty, massive homelessness, corruption, billionaires getting richer and richer at expense of the people, the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, is not allowed to extend to those who fight for the interest of the poor and working class Black community to end these conditions, to do something about it. And clearly, we're talking about a situation where the First Amendment is being denied to Chairman Omali Yeshitela. And all I can say is, wow, wow. And we're gonna stand by and watch this and say that this has no ramifications, as the chairman just said, for the question of freedom of speech for everyone. And to the media, I urge you to fact check. Isn't that what they always say the media does? Because there are countless videos of Chairman Omali Yeshitela speaking from way back, from decades ago. We can see his writings, his books, his pamphlets. We can see the archives of the Burning Spear newspaper that were put together by the University of Florida that are public for everybody to see. And tell me, go ahead and raise, is there one time that anything that he said was not true, was not true, was not the reality of the world and recorded history, even though I do realize that recorded history is banned in the state of Florida from being taught, that what is said also, what the chairman said 50 years ago, is exactly what he would say now. And that is that this system is founded on crime, on the legacy of the enslavement of African people that still reigns today as the basis of wealth of the banks, of Wall Street, of white wealth, and even the expectations of white wealth. These indictments have no basis in reality, but this is how this government has attacked African people, Black people, who struggled for freedom and self-determination, to actually have power over their lives, to make sure that nobody could hurt them ever again. Is there a problem with that? And that the same thing was done to Marcus Garvey in the 1920s, to Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Paul Robeson, and so many others. So many other Black people, African people who have struggled to change the conditions that they face in the world. And I support that. And it is completely absurd and profoundly racist that anyone would say that Chairman Omali Yeshitela is anything but his own person, that he would be somebody else's agent. What? I said, there's videos, you can see him speaking. He has agency. He is no one else's person or agent or anything else. Chairman Omali Yeshitela is incredibly brilliant. He is a dedicated and courageous African man who fights for his community, who wins and has friends and supporters and admirers all over the world. And he is an ardent advocate of anyone fighting against injustice anywhere. Are we to accept that it is not allowed for Black people to fight for the interests of the poor and the oppressed, and for us as white people to not have the right to stand in solidarity with that and to fight for reparations to African people? The chairman has done what cities and states don't do. He raised resources, often from the white community, as a stand of reparations that creates programs that actually change the lives of African community. When have you seen the city of St. Pete do that, or any place else in this country? Did we see the radio station in Oakland, in Philadelphia, in other cities? We see St. Louis, we see the women's health centers created, a farmer's market, furniture stores, a baking and pies institution, a basketball court. The Chairman Omali Yeshitela, has fought for peace, dignity, and justice for African people through the return of the value of their stolen labor and resources. He is calling for actual power over what happens to African people and an end to colonialism and domination of whole peoples by other peoples. For us as white people, the chairman gives us the science to see that this system is built on the backs of African people and the oppressed of the earth, and that it can be changed. It can be changed by human hands because that's what created it. And it will be changed, it is being changed by the leadership of African and oppressed peoples everywhere. This is not about racism, it is about colonialism and what the chairman calls the colonial mode of production, something that all oppressed peoples all over the globe are fighting against right now. We can take a stand. The chairman calls white people to action, and this is the work I do under his leadership and we do in the Uhuru Solidarity Committee and African People Solidarity Committee to support the movement for liberation of African people here and around the world, because in Africa and everywhere there are African people, they are still catching hell today. We unite with reparations to African people to establish real economic development, which they can benefit, not at their expense. The chairman has spent his life fighting for a simple truth, solving a simple question: why should African people be oppressed and poor and stuffed into prisons and face early death here and around the world? And Africa is the richest continent on the planet Earth and is still being looted today, as the chairman says. So the chairman is correct. I unite with what he's saying. I want to fight for this planet. I call on all white people to fight to defend Chairman Omali Yeshitela, the African People's Socialist Party, the Uhuru movement against this baseless attack. It is in our interest. Fight for dropping the charges of the Uhuru 3, hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa, reparations now.
Thank you to Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Chairwoman Penny Hess, Director Akile Anai, the attorneys Addie Griffin, Mutaki Akbar, and Leonard Goodman, and to the media. My name is Jesse Nevel. I am a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee and the chair of our mass organization, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, also known as USM. I am also one of the Uhuru 3 indicted on bogus charges by the federal government on April 18th, along with Penny Hess and Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who is the primary target of these vicious attacks. As APSC's mass organization, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement works under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party with the strategic purpose of extending the struggle for African liberation into the white population. Based on the strategy and leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, our work is to organize white people to turn our backs on a social system built on slavery, genocide, and colonialism for our benefit, and to join the rest of humanity by fighting for reparations to African people. I have had the honor to be a part of this organization for the past 13 years. And in 2017, I was asked by Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party to run for mayor of St. Petersburg, Florida, on the campaign platform of unity through reparations. In addition to reiterating what we said at the arraignments held this past Monday and the previous Tuesday, that we are not guilty of the absurd charges that we are Russian spies deployed by the Kremlin to disrupt the St. Pete local elections. I would like to add that I firmly and proudly stand in complete solidarity and unity with the African People's Socialist Party, the Uhuru movement, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, the Uhuru House, the Black community of St. Petersburg, and African and oppressed peoples everywhere. I denounce these horrific attacks on their presumed right to freedom of speech and political expression by the US government's so-called Department of Justice. These charges are illegitimate, and we should all be outraged and disgusted at this blatant, despicable, and shameful campaign of repression that the US government is waging against Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the Uhuru movement. The charges against the chairman, Penny, and myself are false, but they are not just false. They're false to an idiotic and laughable extreme. As Penny Hess just said, and as the chairman clearly demonstrated, anyone who knows anything about Chairman Omali Yeshitela knows how ridiculous the notion is that anyone is behind the scenes, pulling the strings, telling Chairman Omali Yeshitela what to say or do. It is such an offensive and slanderous allegation that to even dignify it with the response feels inappropriate. For more than 60 years of his life, Chairman Omali Yeshitela has fought for the liberation and unification of Africa and African people, freedom for Black people. That has been his life for over 6 decades. He has built a global movement empowering and uplifting African people to reclaim their own agency and self-determination over their lives and resources. Under his leadership, the Uhuru movement has built political and economic programs in the hands of the African working class on nearly every continent. Today in St. Louis, Missouri, where I live, the Uhuru movement has built a program called the Black Power Blueprint that has brought life and hope back to the deeply impoverished North Side, building community centers, gardens, farmers markets, housing and workforce programs for formerly incarcerated African people, trainings for doulas and midwives, and is now working to construct a Black women's health center to build community-based solutions to the grave and genocidal rates of infant and maternal mortality faced by African women in this country. The US government is attempting to put Chairman Omali Yeshitela in prison, not because they actually believe he's a Russian agent. but because they know who he really is. Just like they knew who Martin Luther King really was, who Marcus Garvey really was, who Malcolm X really was, who Fred Hampton really was, a freedom fighter for his people and for the oppressed peoples of the world. But they can't openly say that. They can't openly charge Chairman Omali Yeshitela with being an agent of freedom. So they lie and charge him as an agent of some so-called foreign power that we're all supposed to be afraid of. And in the same indictment, they charge myself and Penny Hess, again, not because they actually think we are working for the Russians, but because they know who we work for, the African Liberation Movement, because they know we work under the leadership, or as they like to say, subject to the influence and direction of, not the Russians, but the African People's Socialist Party. We speak not for some foreign malign influence, but for the millions of other white people out there who refuse to be complicit with our own government's unceasing state-sanctioned terror and violence against African people, as the world recently witnessed once again with the public lynching of Jordan Neely by a white man in New York, who has not even been arrested or charged with a crime, or by the countless other acts of colonial brutality against Black women, children, and men every day. Despite the government's best efforts to scare white people away from standing in solidarity with the African Liberation Movement, more and more of us are becoming co-conspirators too, and joining the Uhuru Solidarity Movement in over 140 cities throughout this country under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party and Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Again, our slogan given to us by our leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, is unity through reparations. And our message for the white community and to all who believe in freedom is to join the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa campaign. Hands Off Uhuru means hands off freedom of speech, hands off the First Amendment, hands off freedom of political expression and assembly. If Chairman Omali Yeshitela's right to freedom of speech is nullified, then even the presumption of freedom of speech itself will be gone. Now is the time to send a message to the government that you will not stand by and do nothing. Demand these charges be dropped. Donate to the Legal Defense Fund at handsoffuhuru.org/donate. Join the fight back. We will win. Hands off Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Hands off Penny Hess. Hands off Uhuru. Hands off Africa. Unity through reparations. Thank you.
I would like to firstly thank and appreciate, salute my leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, our comrades Penny Hess, Jesse Nevel, and our legal counsel, Muttaqi Akbar, Addie Griffin, and Leonard Goodman. So we are going to take about 15 minutes for questions from the media, and they can be posed to the lawyers and the comrades here.
Can I ask a question? There was a fourth member of the group that was part of the indictment, but we're not talking about him today at all. It's not part of this.
There is no other member of our group, our party, movement who is a part of the indictment. The fourth member was Akile Anai, and they have decided not to indict Akile. It would be helpful also if media would indicate what medium you're with, what media.
Yeah, I'll say on this for Phoenix. Omali, we still there. I did not know you guys have a whole organization in St. Louis. When did that all happen?
I'm glad you asked that question. One of the reasons this press conference has taken so long up to this point is because many people only know what they have read about an indictment, and most of the media have used as their stories the indictment that has come from the Justice Department. You don't know, if you didn't know we're in St. Louis, you probably know we're in Washington, D.C., Huntsville, Alabama, New York, variety of places in the Bahamas, in South Africa, in Germany, in England, in France. We're a lot of different places. So we've been in St. Louis now since the murder of Mike Brown in 2014. We've actually rehabilitated much of North St. Louis. You should come to St. Louis. And I invite everybody to come to St. Louis and even come here. Because you don't, just to read a press statement from the Justice Department and assume you know something about us is crazy. And anybody who's in this area, including you, Mitch, know what we've stood for and fought for, whether you liked it or agreed with it or not. You know who we are in the sense that we've been engaged in struggle to improve the lives of our people, and that we have always believed in unifying with every oppressed person on the planet Earth. And I just want to say that. So I'm glad to raise the question. Yeah, we're in St. Louis and a lot of other different places that were not mentioned in the Justice Department press conference, press release, that many people, much of the media, too much, reported as if it were gospel. Uhuru.
Are there any other questions from the media? All right, Chairman, you want to do closing?
Only thing I want to say is, Mitch, you were with the radio station I once had a show on, and free speech got me kicked off that radio station as well. One of the reasons we have a radio station here is because other white-owned, or as many like to say, like people, corporate-owned medium, don't give us access. So we have to get our own access. That's what our movement has always been about. The freedom to have our own power over our own lives so that Black people can speak for ourselves. And that radio station, they kicked me off, even though we raised more money on that radio station than any other show. But they didn't like what we were saying. And I understand that. I work for the St. Petersburg Times. It now calls itself the Tampa Bay Times. And I lost my job at the Tampa Bay Times when in 1966, I think it was, the March Against Fear, after Meredith was shot in Mississippi, and the movement came together, people, and asked for people from around the country to come to complete that march in Mississippi. And I went and asked my bosses at the Times to give me a leave of absence so that I could attend that. And I would write articles for the Times, as I had done when I was in Watts. When the Watts Rebellion happened, I wrote articles for the St. Pete Times that I'm ashamed of today. But they fired me. Rather than do that, they said, if you go, you're gonna lose your job, because what you should do is just stay here and work real hard and be an example for Black people. You understand how you make it. I decided to make that trip, and I lost my job. Free speech is a mother. And in this country, part of the mythos of this country revolves around the fact that the people who left Europe and came here at the expense of the indigenous people and what have you, did so in a struggle against the feudal nobility of England. And they put forth various principles that they wanted to have so that they couldn't have kings telling them to shut up and don't say this and don't say that. They wanted the right to tell the kings to shut up. And part of what they did was, you might call it, coming out of that process, the weaponization of free speech. Free speech, free speech. That's what I was taught. Free speech. That's what they said when they went against the will of George and other despots throughout Europe. Free speech. That's what we're talking about. That's what this is about, notwithstanding press releases that you get from the Justice Department. Free speech. They've never accused us of hurting anybody, stealing from anybody. It's free speech, that's the question. Not the stock market or anything else. No, none of that stuff. Not even doing dirty things with election, not scaling the walls of the Capitol, not defecating on Nancy Pelosi's desk. Free speech. The right for Black people to speak up in our own interests And here's a contradiction that we are confronted with all the time that makes too many white people vulnerable to this kind of nonsense. It's that for the longest period of time, white people have been subjects of history and African people have only been objects of history. We've never been able to tell our own story. And so because we have been objects of history that's been told by somebody else, when we begin to speak for ourselves, we don't tell the same story. And because we don't tell the same story, it can be disturbing. You've never heard anybody say this about you before. And so now you hear the slave defining the slave master as opposed to the slave master always doing all the defining, and you find out to your surprise that the slave doesn't feel the same way about the slave master as the slave master feels about himself. Yes. That's the contradiction that we're dealing with. Thank you so much.
Uhuru. So that will conclude today's press conference. Again, I really want to salute our leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Comrades Penny Hess, Jesse Nevel, our incredible legal counsel, all of the community members for coming out today. And for those who are watching and watching us online as well as in the media, handsoffuhuru.org/donate. Drop the charges against Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Penny Hess, Jesse Nevel, the Uhuru 3. Hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa. Uhuru.